This is Mac OS Ken.
Apple grows the M1 ecosystem. It is Tuesday, the 28th of December, 2021. I'm Ken Ray, and this is a special edition of Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. Learn more and check your rate at upstart.com/MacOSCan. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. I told you yesterday that MacCast's Adam Christianson and I got to talk about the biggest Apple stories of 2021 as we saw them. We did that for a presentation for the Silicon Valley Mac user group. It will come as no surprise, the host of the MacCast was pretty turned on by what happened with the Mac.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into hardware for a little bit, I think, and talk about kind of the big stories for Apple in 2021 from the hardware side. And I think there's no doubt that we kind of have to start with the hardware transition to Apple Silicon. And it's amazing to me, and probably to a lot of you, because I realize we've now been through 3 transitions, 4 different processors. And Apple is about a year into their 2-year transition, what they said would be a 2-year transition to Apple Silicon. And they've given us some incredible, very exciting hardware. I would argue to say that like this is one of the most exciting times to be a Mac person. And I don't think many people would disagree with me. And what's interesting to me about this transition too, is it marks our return to RISC processing with the ARM. Now, Apple licenses the ARM instruction set from ARM Holdings out of the UK. And they actually design their own processors. So what we're dealing with is, licensing an instruction set. Apple actually designs all of their own processors, and most of them are made and manufactured by Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. And that relationship has been obviously very fruitful for Apple. Started with the A series processors, and now we have the M1 system processors, the system on a chip designs, combining CPUs, GPUs, I/O controllers, ISPs, neural engines, security chips, all in a single architecture. They have the unified memory architecture. All of this stuff going to facilitate basically what Apple wants to do with their hardware, and where they were sort of held back or maybe limited by some of the other companies. They had a great relationship with Intel, but they realized with what they wanted to do with their designs, things like that, incredible performance with incredible power efficiency, and not, keeping with the Steve Jobs mantra of wanting to not have massive cooling systems and fans. They realized they kind of needed to branch out on their own. And I mean, they really started this transition years ago, maybe even decades ago, planning this out, hiring engineers and the staff. And it's really proven this year to be incredible. I mean, we had the M1s last year, but this year they came out with the Pro versions of those processors, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, which just took things to a whole new level. So you've got 70% faster CPU performance than the M1. You've got a 10-core CPU design, 8 high-performance cores, 2 high-efficiency cores. Interestingly, the same CPU in both the Pro and the Max processors, which is easy to forget about because the performance is so different, but that really comes down to the GPU side of things. So you've got up to 32 core GPUs in the Max. They really ramped up the RAM, a big complaint, I guess, of the original M1s. Well, if you could levy a complaint against an incredible processor coming to the Mac was, you were limited to 16 gigs of RAM. Apple ramped that up this year with the Pro and the Max to up to 64 gigs of RAM. Also increase the memory bandwidth in that processor design. So incredibly fast, 200 gigabits for the Pro, gigabits per second for the Pro, 400 gigabits per second for the Max. And then, of course, they recognized their market for these processors, video professionals, YouTubers, all those sorts of things, and, took the processing for video, not only containing acceleration for MPEG video, but moving that to ProRes, right? Apple's ProRes. So you've got ProRes accelerators in both processors, a single in the Pro and duals in the Max. So just super exciting time for Apple hardware. And so the processors, I think, really were the star of the show. But related to that, we saw a bunch of uses for those processors, right? We saw a bunch of great Mac hardware. And like I said at the beginning, I think it's super exciting time to be a Mac fan. And it felt for many years with iPhones and iPads like the Mac was maybe a little bit left behind. But they kicked things off early in the year with a great new redesign of the iMac. I don't know if any of you have the 24-inch iMac. I have a hard time not buying one, even though I probably don't need one just because they're beautiful, great colors. They leveraged the M1 architecture that Apple introduced with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, and Mac Mini. So 8-core CPUs, 8-core GPUs, great performance, that up to 16 gigs of RAM. What was amazing about the iMac design is I think it really realized the sort of design goal of kind of having a single sheet of glass. They're incredibly thin, 11.5 millimeters. They brought the MagSafe connector, which was an interesting decision, to the iMac, and brought really innovative things like the Ethernet port on moving that to the power brick so that it wasn't on the machine. Because literally, once you move that thin, you have issues like you just don't have the space. The headphone jack is, of course, on the bottom of the display because the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack is actually too deep to fit in the thin architecture of the iMac. So cool new designs, great new system, and that was like right at the beginning of 2021. And then, of course, they followed that up later in the year in the fall with the anticipated update of the Pro systems using those M1 Pro, M1 Max chips with the 14-inch, 16-inch MacBook Pros. That's where they introduced another thing. I think, Ken, I can't remember if you mentioned this, but this was in the early predictions for the analysts that Apple would be moving to mini LED technology. So this is where we see the introduction of I guess we really saw it earlier with the iPad Pro, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really the move to what Apple calls their Liquid Retina XDR display, mini LED backlighting with dimming zones, which again helps with the power efficiency and performance of the displays. Also bringing the 120 hertz variable refresh rate, another technology that is really centered around providing power efficiency and performance. So you get great scrolling capabilities, but it adapts so that it can use less power when you're not scrolling around as much. It really adds to battery life and performance. And another thing about the Pros that was super exciting this year was bringing back and really listening to the Pro community about ports and what they need in these machines. So a lot of people know with the earlier models, like the 16-inch MacBook Pro, like I have, Apple went to just simply Thunderbolt USB-C ports, and that didn't really serve the professional market as much as they wanted. Pros want things like HDMI ports, SD card slots. MagSafe was a huge loss, and all of that stuff returned in 2021, which was super exciting. And seems like a silly thing, but a big one for me was finally introducing a true 1080p FaceTime camera on their Pro systems. The fact that they didn't have that was kind of crazy. And of course, with all that performance, you get great battery life, 21 hours of battery life. And so really, again, I think we have some of the best Macs this year that we've ever seen. And it's creating a lot of buzz and excitement. So kind of what's next, just looking briefly into 2022, we're expecting M1 MacBook Pros, and essentially what it's looking like that's going to be is basically doubling the M1 Max and quadrupling the M1 Max. So we're talking things like 20-core CPUs, 64-core GPUs, or even 40-core CPUs and 128-core GPUs. So just incredible I can't even imagine with the performance of the current systems. It's almost unfathomable to think where the machines are going in 2022. And then we're also expecting, of course, a 27-inch version of the iMac. Some people are calling it the iMac Pro. It may be the first system where Apple introduced kind of the next generation, faster clocked version of the M1 processor, the M2.
In a moment, Adam Christianson makes a horrible accusation. Then we move over to the tablet side. It's more of Adam's M1 2021 recap in a moment, but first a word from Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. If high-interest loans or credit card debt drag down your 2021, plan for a new and better year with Upstart. With Upstart, you can take care of existing debt quickly and easily. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 1 million people have used Upstart to get a simple, fixed monthly payment with a clear payoff date. Upstart looks at more than just your credit score, factoring in income and current employment. You can check your rate without impacting your credit score in minutes for loans between $1,000 to $50,000, and you can receive funds as fast as 1 business day after accepting your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/macOSKen. UPSTART, that's upstart.com/macOSKen. Don't forget to use my URL to let them know I sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Upstart.com/macOSKen. When last we left Adam, he had just wrapped his look at the Mac side in 2021.
That's everything that's happening with Mac. I know, Ken, you're not a Mac person, but like, how can you not be sort of just jazzed up about
I'm a
this
Mac person, dude. I'm talking to you on a Mac right now.
Well, I mean, like, you're not a hardware person, you've said.
I'm not a hardware person, that's
like,
true.
This stuff gets me going. I don't know about other people in the group here, but like, I get super excited about this stuff.
Here's the thing, and I actually wanted to ask you about that. Like, how do you convince somebody? Because I don't have a hard time convincing somebody who's been using a Chromebook or just like whatever, less than stellar Windows machine that a Mac is what they want to use. And I will tell them it's going to take them usually a few weeks before they're really as comfortable in front of that machine as they are in front of another. But I can give you a million reasons why you'd want a Mac. Where I start to get a little confused is, so who needs a Mac and who needs a Mac Pro? Because there are lots of people who think, well, I need a Mac Pro because, I'm a pro. And it's like, well, what are you a pro at? It's like, well, I'm really good at checking email and going to Facebook. I mean, but the thing is, well, I'm sorry. I'm excited about it in theory. I always want the best thing that's going to be the thing that I need for me. But I bought a MacBook Pro the last time because I thought I might get into video, and I got into video a tiny bit, and then I got out of it again. And I'm not dissatisfied with this machine, but I don't get as excited as you. But then what's funny is I'm glad you brought up the possibility of a Mac Pro, because I had you on one of my shows and I think I basically said something to the effect of, okay, so what does that give us? And I thought I could hear your head explode because you seem to think that I was saying, I don't get it. And what I was really saying was, I don't get it, but not in a, I don't understand why anybody would want that. More of I'm like a goldfish staring at a piano. I don't know what that kind of, what that kind of architecture would maybe do for me, I guess is sort of my thing.
Yeah. And I think the kinds of people that are getting excited about this are, people working in academia, science, technology. You're talking about folks who are maybe developers or programmers. You're talking about folks who are in Hollywood, right? And what it gives them, of course, is not sitting around waiting for render things to happen, or, to be able to realize your creative vision in real time, where you kind of can't today, right? So I think even us as podcasters, we can relate to that, right? Or anybody can relate to that. Anybody who's seen a spinning beach ball or a progress bar on their machine can kind of relate to that. Now, where you fall in that continuum, right, is a whole different story. And I think you have to hit the nail on the head, right? It's just like, it's amazing to think that our consumer level machines are now basically something that pros would have dreamed about even a year or two ago, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's the exciting part about the hardware to me. And actually that's a great transition into like the last thing that I want to talk about that relates to hardware in 2021, but in this kind of section is the M1 chip coming to the iPad Pro, right? So that was the other thing, is like the M series processor is basically, based on the same technology, same design concepts and systems as the A series, same instruction set. Because of the power efficiency, because of all of those reasons that make it a great Mac processor, Apple also, decided, hey, this makes a great iPad processor as well. And so we saw the M1 going into an iPad, and where that sort of relates to what we're talking about is it kind of has unrealized potential, because it's really now up to the developers to figure out how to push the iPad to the next level. And that sort of opens up the ability for them to do that. Again, they added other technologies like the mini LED display, the Liquid Retina XDR display, 120 hertz refresh rate. A big one for the iPad Pro this year too was bringing 5G, which, 5G is going to be the big thing in 2022 to drive iPhone sales, especially on the lower market. We're expecting an update to the SE2. Apple replaced the Lightning connector on the iPad with Thunderbolt. So it's really moving the iPad more into that realm of being more like a desktop system, a Mac, but it's still an iPad and it's got all those things. And they introduced some new technologies that haven't even made it to the Mac yet, which I'm a little disappointed about. Things like Center Stage with the wide angle FaceTime camera. So lots of exciting things happening this year in Mac hardware and iPad hardware, I guess, too. Just all centered around Apple Silicon.
Are they ever gonna just go ahead and start calling the processor in the iPhone Pro and iPhone Pro Max M, whatever? Is it going to be powered by the M1?
That is a great question, right? I mean, it has the potential. I think right now the differentiating factor is, as much as, yes, the M1 is incredibly power efficient and power performant, to really push it to its limits, it still requires some active cooling, right? So we still have fans. They don't come on in our MacBook Pros, but as frequently. But if you're really pushing them, they do. And I guarantee you, like when we get to the dual and the quad that we're going to see in the Mac Pros, there's going to be some serious cooling systems in there, and you just don't have the space or capability to do that currently in iPhone. But will they change that naming? That remains to be seen. I think they'll keep it separate for a little while, but I could see it merge at some point.
It sounds like a great way to start selling more accessories, though. It's a MagSafe case with a fan, maybe, or you put it in the freezer and then you take it out and you go. Our time with the Silicon Valley Mac user group continues tomorrow. What do Pegasus and Apple's expanded protections for children have in common? We'll looking at your data on Wednesday's show. Plus, Apple releases iPhone 13. The year in review continues as we barrel toward 2022. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. Learn more and check your rate at upstart.com/macOSCan. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macoscan.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that will do this special edition of macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.